All right. Welcome to the Board of Adjustment, City of Tempe, for July 19th, 2023. I would like to start by reading the Board of Adjustment preamble. So the City of Tempe Board of Adjustment is authorized by the Arizona Revised Statutes and the City of Tempe zoning ordinance. Its function is to grant relief where a literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance would result in an unnecessary property hardship, to interpret provisions of the zoning ordinance variances, and to hear appeals from any person or city official aggrieved by the decision of a person responsible for the enforcement of the zoning ordinance, zoning administrator or hearing officer abatements. The board has the City of Tempe's Community Development staff summary reports on the item being considered at the meeting today, and we'll use this report in our deliberations. All applicants and interested citizens, when your request is called or when you wish to address the board, please make sure that you've filled out one of the citizens' request forms located on the table by the doors, and then step to the microphone, state your name and city of residence. Please submit the form to a staff member before you begin speaking at the microphone. I'd like to introduce the staff that is here. Well, most of the staff that's here. Our Director of Community Development, Jeff Temilevich, is not here tonight. We have Ryan Levake, Deputy Director, Community Development, Steve Abrahamson, Principal Planner, Jennifer Daniels, Administrative Assistant 2, and Jason Wolf with our media. So I would like to introduce the board members. To my left, we have Board Member Morrow, Board Member Gans, Board Member Key. I am Chairman Watson. I have Vice Chairman Confer to my right, Board Member Palmer, and Board Member Miller. Okay, so our first item is to approve the meeting minutes for the June 21st, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
I move to approve.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Approve or motion by Board Member Palmer, second by Board Member Kigi. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, we have a vote of 5. We have 2 abstentions, as the 2 other board members were not here for that meeting. So it'll be 5-0 with 2 abstaining. Staff announcements. Before we get to the staff announcements, I would like to announce that our Principal Planner and gracious leader, Steve Abrahamson, will be retiring after 26 years with the city. We thank you for your service. We thank you for your coaching and the work that you've done as part of this board. It's made my work as the chair and my participation in the past very easy, and you've done a fantastic job. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the kind words. In a way, I'll miss this, so thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Are there any other staff announcements? Mr. Abramson?
I'm sorry?
Are there any other staff announcements?
We do not have a meeting yet scheduled for August. There is a potential for a variance case from Mr. Jasper. That's the I meant to ask you about this before we left the office.
I don't think it's gonna make it to that meeting.
Okay, so maybe you'll get a August off, and we'll have a September meeting. You'll have a September meeting.
Yes, your meeting will be elsewhere, I'm sure. Okay, our item on the agenda for today is a request for an appeal of the zoning administrator's decision to deny a reasonable accommodation waiver to increase the number of residents in a group home from 5 to 10 pursuant to Section 3-409 for Northside Siesta for a proposed group home located at 2604 South Siesta Drive. The appellant is Northside Recovery LLC. And I'm looking at the minutes. Excuse me for just a moment. So then we'll start with the presentation from the appellant.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for all being here. Oh, wonderful. Thank you all for coming. Before we begin, is it appropriate if I ask a couple of questions? We as an organization are new to this process, so just to kind of understand, is the scope of this appeal limited to the basis of the denial from the city?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Abramson, but I believe the answer is yes, it's specific to that.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly, it is.
Okay. And then I take it everyone has read the appeals packet, probably multiple occasions by now.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's see if I can figure out, please bear with me. So Northside Recovery, and I don't intend this presentation to take up too much of your time. It's been around since 2021. The organization was founded by a group of healthcare providers that wanted to provide a valve of relief in the system of care that we currently have. One of the gaps that our current system of healthcare has is the addressing of social determinants of health. Very often what we will see is individuals with mental health and substance use issues will go into a residential treatment program, for example, in which they're not able to address social determinants of health when they're there. When they're there, they're not getting their driver's license. They are not getting their social security card and their birth certificate. They're not working on securing employment. And so when they come out of those residential treatment centers, they have nowhere to go. And so really a big piece of and I am not one of the founders, of the reasons this organization was founded was to do it just a little bit better. The organization is intentionally small. We have 3 different transitional living homes currently. Each of our transitional living homes are accredited by the Joint Commission. If you're not familiar with the Joint Commission, the Joint Commission is the golden standard for healthcare and hospitals for accreditation. So we have 3 transitional living homes currently, and then our headquarters is located here in Tempe, Arizona. We offer a few different programs within our organization. We have a partial hospitalization day program, and really what that is a reference to is the amount of time that somebody spends in treatment per day. So partial hospitalization would be 5 hours of treatment per day for 5 days a week. Intensive outpatient, it's just a variance of that, 3 hours, 3 days a week. We provide outpatient services to community members, and then we have this transitional living component that I just referenced as well. What we provide is truly individualized care, and a lot of this will make sense, perhaps when I skip ahead and look at our team. So we have a pretty robust and diverse clinical team. Our Chief Clinical Officer is Dr. Laurel Rettle. We have Sean Gallo, who's the Deputy Chief Clinical Officer. We have clinical psychologist on staff. We have Stephen Bass, who's board certified in addiction medicine. He's also an anesthesiologist, but he doesn't perform any of those services for us. And then a team of master's level counselors and therapists that work with our clients. Our ratios are intentionally small. So what we've seen historically in our system of care is that a therapist or a counselor could have a caseload of 20, 30 clients, but with our organization, it's kept intentionally small so that we can focus on this individualized care. We can ensure that our clients are getting the time that they need. We can ensure that their other social determinants of health are also being addressed. So again, from the moment they come into our transitional living, we're working, what do you need in order to get a job? Can we help you get your birth certificate if you don't have one? Can we help you secure employment? So we work with different community partners to try to get them back on their feet, because a lot of these individuals have just gotten to a point where they've perhaps burned every last bridge. They don't have any family or support systems to help them out. So that's what we're trying to do, is enable them to build the support system. Our outcomes have been fantastic. Granted, we haven't been around that long, so time will tell, but we believe that what we're doing has really worked. Just about every week, I see a different client leave the transitional living. They've secured employment. They've found living within the community. Oftentimes, it's an Oxford-style home, if you're familiar with those style of homes, or a sober living home, or they've moved out with another client. But we've seen success. The individuals who come through our program are able to address their mental health and their substance use issues while simultaneously building this support network so that they can thrive when they go back into the community. As everyone I think knows, there's a housing problem that we're dealing with right now. And so part of what we're trying to do with the transitional living is address this. There aren't affordable alternatives for a lot of these individuals who are disabled for purposes of the Fair Housing Act. There aren't a lot of alternatives for them to get back on their feet, particularly with the rising cost of rent, as I'm sure each of you have experienced. Just before our last hearing, excuse me for 1 second, the day before, the legislature actually denied the housing bill that had been approved, or that was going through the process. So I think it's safe to say this housing problem will continue, and we're trying to address that. We're trying to be a community partner in that respect by allowing these individuals to stabilize and get back on their feet. The Siesta home, it's a fairly large home. As you can see, I have some pictures here. Forgive me, my PowerPoint presentation skills are, I built this myself, so I was working with my own hands. The home, as you can see, it's not designed in any way to be institutional. The quarters or living areas are designed so that they're compliant with the state's sober living requirements. So it's registered as a sober living home under the state of Arizona, the Department of Health. The atmosphere in the home is designed to be intentionally therapeutic. We want these clients, these residents at the transitional living to feel like they're at home. A lot of these individuals have not grown up in a supportive family environment. They could have generations of trauma that they're trying to unravel. And so by providing this supportive living environment as they're working through their diagnoses, it's worked. The living quarters, as you can see here, this is how it is set up. There are 2 beds in a room, kind of like I would say, a fraternity or sorority, if you will. It's not so close to quarters to where people are stepping over each other. It's actually quite spacious. We try to keep it as clean and organized as possible. The homes themselves are staffed 24/7, so it's not a situation in which we're not there. We have somebody there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no days off to ensure that these individuals that are residing there have the peer support that they need, and can quickly get access to any services they may need. So if they need to go to urgent care and they don't have a vehicle, we'll get you there. If you need to talk with your prescriber about changing the dosage of your medication, we'll help you do that. If you need to get a ride to work, we'll help you get a bus pass so you can get to work. It's really trying to get these individuals off their feet. This slide, it may appear to be a little disjointed, but this kind of goes to the heart of the appeal itself. So and forgive me if I don't overstep my boundaries here. So the request for reasonable accommodation was denied on the basis of a failure to establish a nexus between the disability and the occupancy request. And so this will kind of support the request, because the request is oddly specific. The way the zoning is set up in Tempe, we are not allowed to have more than 5 unrelated persons living at the home, and the request is for 10. And 10 wasn't just a made-up number. It's actually been supported by medical and social service professionals alike since as far back as the 70s. It's this idea of group dynamics. So Dr. Irvin Yalom, if everyone read the materials, he's a psychiatry professor at Stanford University. He really pioneered this concept. And why groups of 10, and he's between this 8 and 12 range, why groups of 10 are so important is they naturally foster this environment that has corrective and supportive dynamics built in with it. It ensures engagement with other individuals, and it also helps us ensure group stability. The individuals that reside at these homes, they have meetings within these homes. They talk with each other. How was your day? What sort of obstacles did you encounter? How can we overcome those barriers? When we're looking at groups of 10, we also get a level of built-in stability within the group so that if 2 or 3 individuals depart, the group itself does not fall apart. It can withstand change. Groups of 5, however, lack these dynamics. There isn't enough intellectual, ethnic, or cultural diversity, and the group really isn't in a position to ensure that it's really a supportive environment that'll hold people accountable. And this graphic here, it doesn't align perfectly, but it was the best thing I could come up with. It shows you just the number of relationships that can be created between individuals residing at the home. So it's not just a relationship where one person is talking to somebody else. It's a relationship in which it exponentially grows the number of individual relationships as the number of residents in the home increases. Now, removing barriers to high quality care is what we're about. We believe in providing holistic and individualized treatment that sees no limits and will result in happy and healthy individuals, communities, and families. Any questions? Thank you for the time.
Actually,
Questions
Mr.
from the
Chairman,
board?
I do have a question for you.
Yes, please.
Approximately how long do your residents typically reside in this transitional facility?
It's, I would say, approximately 120 days. That gives most of our residents, and it'll vary depending on the geographic location of the home itself, but that'll enable individuals with enough time to, and perhaps let me back up a minute and kind of help explain the concept. So what our current system of care fails to address primarily is these mental health issues that a lot of individuals are facing. And so they turn to drugs to cope with their mental health issues. Once they reach this state of sobriety, then these mental health issues kind of become unearthed. And so we're trying to give our clients an opportunity to get sober. They're sober when they're into our program, they're tested frequently, to address their mental health issues, to find secure and stable employment, and to find stable and safe and supportive housing as well. So I would say it's approximately within that time frame, but it'll change depending on somebody's condition when they come into the program. We've had some clients that have come in and be there for approximately a month and a half because they just needed a little bit of time. They were able to find a job quickly through a family member or something like that. Thank you for the question, board member.
And sorry, just as a follow-up, where are they typically coming from? From a residential program? If so, a 30-day, 90-day, what type?
Great question. It varies, but it's not uncommon for us to be a sort of a step down from a residential program. It kind of goes into what I was discussing before. We'll have individuals who may have been in a residential program for 30 or 60 or 90 days, but they're not addressing anything in the real world. So when they come outside of the residential program, they still don't have a job, they don't have housing, they're not able to get a job because they can't get to the DMV. So a lot of our individuals will come, our clients will come from residential. They may come from the community. They may have, their conditions may have caused them to lose their safe and supportive housing environment. They may be coming, I think that they can kind of come from all over the place. We don't intentionally, I would say, seek somebody coming from anywhere specifically. We just take our clients as they come to us. A lot of them come through referrals from community partners.
Thank you. Board Member Gans.
Yes, how many staff members are there at night?
At where?
At the premises at night, how many do you propose to have there?
At nighttime? During nighttime, it's just one staff member. And so,
Okay, I asked that question probably from a personal point of view. I have a son who worked for an organization similar to yours, and he was the staff member at night, and he accidentally fell asleep. Essentially, there was no staff member there. What happens in your case? Do you have a second staff member available?
We do have second staff members available. So for the individuals that would be working at the home, they have supervisors, and then there's a program manager above them that would come in and fill in if somebody called out or something like that. But the employees that work during that shift, that's their only shift. So their life is kind of scheduled around those graveyard hours, if you will. And we haven't encountered that problem.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Board Member Morrow?
So if we were to grant the request and you would be allowed to have 10 clients, are you anticipating trying to have 10 clients at the Siesta House?
I would say anticipate up to 10. It'll depend on the dynamic, the kind of milieu, if you will, within the group of individuals who are there. So if there are 6 or 7 really strong personalities, we wouldn't push the limits there, if you will. And I referenced in our appeal, we have one of our transitional living homes is zoned for up to 15. It's not in the city of Tempe, it's in the city of Phoenix. And I don't believe we've ever had 15 residents at that home because it goes beyond the Irvin Yalom group dynamics, which is kind of this 8 to 12 sweet spot. And 15 would just practically be unmanageable.
As a follow-up, so it's a 2,000 square foot house. How many bedrooms does it have?
4 rooms, and the garage has been converted into, not converted, it acts as if a bedroom.
So it'd be 4 plus 1, and so you're proposing potentially 2 per.
That's what we use as an office, more or less, currently.
So would you,
Yes.
so where would you put the other 2 people then in the garage?
There would be 2, so the way the DHS, the sober living rules work, is you can have 1 bed per 50 square or cubic feet. So most of the rooms would have 2, up to 2 beds in it, and then the master bedroom can usually accommodate 3, perhaps 4.
So with 1 master, so math is not my strong suit, so that's potentially 9 beds would be maybe your max based on the limitations of it.
Could be, and maybe there's a way to get 10 in there.
So I have, oh,
I was going to comment. So if your capacity seems to be 9, why are you asking for 10?
Wow. Candidly, the request was begun before I joined the organization, and I'm just kind of picking up from where it is. I think 10 will enable us to be in that sweet spot between the 8 and 12 when we're thinking of the group dynamics.
Right, but my math says we're taking it down to 400, from 400 square foot per person down to 200, and that includes the common spaces as well. So what is the guidance of this, the doctor that you have referenced on the 8 to 11, 8 to 12 size? What is his reasonable accommodation of square footage per resident?
I don't know if he has any opinion on square footage per individual.
Okay. Board Member Palmer?
so I have a follow-up question about the garage space. So has that space been converted then to a room and is remaining to be a bedroom?
Correct. It is converted to a bedroom. I believe it was that way prior to our occupancy there.
And I guess maybe it's a question for staff, if that's something that is legal in the city of Tempe to convert a garage space to livable space. The reason I ask is if you have 10 residents and staff, you can assume that multiple people are going to have vehicles. So then you're taking up driveway space in addition to roadway space and could be altering the appearance of a residential neighborhood, right? I think my further question, like I said, it might be for staff about whether or not that is a legal garage conversion to be a livable space.
And if I can address the garage piece, I don't know what it was historically. That's just my assumption. I'm an attorney by trade, so I'm just guessing. That's kind of where it is. There still is a garage there. To the vehicles question or point that you raised, the residents in the home are not permitted to have personal vehicles there at the property. So the vehicle you'll see at any point in time will be a van that will transport the residents to the clinic in order to get treatment, and then the staff member's vehicle. And so
No, that's helpful. And I guess just a follow-up question. So it looked like in the pictures from the street, though, there is a garage door, correct?
Yes, yes.
So is there a garage?
There is a garage, yes. I don't know if the space was modified, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think Brian's coming up.
Gonna wait my turn, but I recall looking at the history on this site in case there was a prior permit for a partial remodel improvement for adding a bedroom within the garage, just a portion of the garage.
Okay.
My understanding is that the stilt garage can accommodate 2 vehicles on site. If that's not the case, then there's a scenario where if you're placing the required parking in the front yard setback, there's a requirement for a use permit, which is a public hearing process to evaluate that type of full enclosure of the garage.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And it is still an operational garage, so I think that helps kind of
That
bridge
does
the
help.
gap.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Board Member Miller?
Oh, okay. Getting to the Joint Commission, and I have to commend you on the fact that you've actually been certified by Joint Commission. It's a pain in the ass to do it, having done it. So it is more than a bit trying. So I was not aware, though, that they actually did certify facilities like this. So.
Yes, they certified us as a transitional living home. So
Do they have specific square footage requirements per resident in that certification?
the Joint Commission does not, that I'm aware of. They defer to state and local law on pretty much most of those topics. And so the local law that they'd be referring to would be I think it's 9-12, the sober living rules in Arizona, and then we're compliant there.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Board Member Gans?
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
How many bathrooms are in this facility?
3 bathrooms.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you all for your time.
We'll hear next from Mr. Levesque.
Board of Adjustment members, Ryan Levesque, Deputy Director for Community Development Planning Division. I also serve as the zoning administrator in this case where a reasonable accommodation waivers is requested. This is the first one of its kind in this process, and we now have the first one that's requesting an appeal. So just to give you a quick history background, the site did previously have an elder care that was classified as a group home back in 2009, and approximately in 2013 to 15, I believe, is when the prior use for the group home had been vacated. In 2021, the City Council adopted Ordinance 02021.22, which basically did an overhaul of our group home section within the Zoning and Development Code. There were some community members and residents that had some concerns of some homes and sites that are being converted and adding basically 10 bedrooms in some of these homes and changing the appearance and look and feel of some of these properties. So we had an opportunity to evaluate our group home regulations that haven't been changed since the mid-90s. We looked at and researched other cities, community members, and we came up with the revisions provided in the group home regulations that exist today. Some of the major changes included was reducing the number of residents allowed within a group home from 10 to 5, and that went into effect on July in 2021. We also introduced what we have before you today, which is the reasonable accommodations waiver process. And it's basically set up to allow someone with a disability, if they're aggrieved under fair housing law, to seek a waiver or granting of a relief of that specific matter that is needed to grant the use of the house for reasons for disability. We've got specific criteria in our code that are outlined in the staff report. And then part of this review process, we reviewed the application and asked for some revisions. We had 3 updates of their justification letter. And our primary concern from the city's representation standpoint is that we were concerned that the nexus between the request for the reasonable accommodation waivers wasn't enough granted to identify this as a specific need for a certain disability for the site. In the scenario where they're describing that the need to have more than 5 or up to 10 in a group environment, if we were to grant this type of request or waiver, then we'd be allowing all group homes in all these manners to allow up to 10 residents per group home. And that's our concerns with this request.
Thank you.
I do want to clarify, the group home does meet our separation requirements, 1,200 foot from one existing group home to another. So it does have the ability to operate as a legal group home with the limitation of 5. If they so choose, they could proceed with the building permit process to get clearance for a group home of up to 5.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Levick?
I have one. So,
Board Member Palmer?
previously you had mentioned that there could be an alternative. They could seek a variance request. Can you explain a little bit about what that would look like?
Yeah, just like relief from the zoning development code, variances is another option that people seek relief from the codes. But those burdens and regulations are based on the variance criteria that's established in state law and determine whether or not, someone can meet those criteria for a variance. In the instance of the reasonable accommodations waivers, there's the specific criteria that's outlined in our code under the group home classification.
Thank you.
Board Member Comfort?
I just wanted, because this is the first one that I think I've seen, the application, we've talked about this application a couple times. The application was for the change from 5 to 10?
Yes,
And this accommodation?
Chair Watson, Board Member Confer, the initial application was for a building permit for a group home. And within the group home permit application, there's some questions and answers that need to be submitted and filed in there. One of them is how many residents intended to be occupied in there. And there's a reference to our zoning and development code about the limitation of up to 5 in there. They had noted and requested that the number of residents they'd like to have in there is 10, which would be an occupancy classification change under the permit process. And as part of that building permit application, there's a review component to make sure that it verifies that it complies with our zoning code standard. It met the separation requirement, but the request for number of residents within there was denied. They could have resubmitted and updated, corrected it. They did not. I believe they were aware of the reasonable accommodation waivers. And then they filed basically an application. It's a free application process. Filing a reasonable accommodation waivers that is then sent and filed to the zoning administrator for review and follow-up. And that was specifically the item in, I believe, April that was ultimately denied after having 3 reviews of the modified letter request. And all that information, the updates, the 3 different letters are provided as part of the attachments in the report.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I ask a follow-up?
You may.
So the request for the ADA accommodation lives separately and independently from that building permit application?
The number of residents. So we have the zoning code ability to determine how many residents are allowed. There is an occupancy classification with building safety in terms of the allowed number of residents in the home. So most homes are built in R3 occupancy construction, which is typically standard for single family home industry. The R4 occupancy, which is as referred to basically a classification anywhere from 6 to 10 residents. And so it follows in line with that same number of residents, requires some greater building code requirements for the site, like providing sprinkler system, fire sprinkler.
When you have more than 6?
Yeah, six or more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Board Member Key?
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions for you, sir. So I think you answered this already, but just to be clear, is there any zoning district in the city of Tempe that would allow a group home of more than 5 people?
No, there's not, sir.
Okay.
Not currently at this time. There have been group homes that have been permitted in the past under the prior regulations that did allow up to 10, and those can continue to remain or be legal non-conforming.
Gotcha, thank you. The second question is, so I have very limited experience with the reasonable accommodation waiver, but the only experience I have is when it was an individual who was with a disability who was looking for this waiver. A common example is a home doesn't allow animals, yet this person needs a service assistance animal there, and so they want to apply for that waiver. This doesn't seem to be an individual that's asking for this waiver. This seems to be a request to just increase the number of people that can be in this facility. Am I missing something here?
No, that's correct, sir. And we looked similarly at that request as well too. The site is allowed as a group home, which the classification of sober living homes does fall under Fair Housing Act laws as a disability. So there's allowed for have residents there as a group home, as a sober living home, but just not based on the number of residents that's being proposed at this time.
Thank you.
Board Member Morrow.
Just for my own clarification, when you use the word building permit application, that's just so that they could operate as a group home. They weren't trying to alter the physical structure. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. All group home classifications have to get clearance through the building permit, whether there's an occupancy change or not. If they still fall under the same occupancy change, then they just do a field inspection of the site to make sure that the home is still compliant with the current building standards.
Okay, and as a follow-up, if we were to grant the appeal and allowed up to 10, that would not give them the ability to add on another 1,000 square feet and 5 more bedrooms. Would that be correct? Or
Am I aware that it's not the intent of this request application, but they could request modifications of the site that is compliant with the zoning standards, setbacks,
they
lot
could,
coverage, yeah.
but that would require a separate process.
Right.
Okay.
Board Member Gans.
My curiosity here, because I'm not fully familiar with this, the fire regulations require that if you go to 10, you must have a sprinkler system, or I guess a fire alarm or something like that. But for a group home of 5, you don't need that. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. That's the difference between the R4 building code occupancy category and the R3.
I see.
Any other questions? Board Member Miller.
Just as a follow-up with that, along with the fire sprinkler system, the dedicated alarm system, what other requirements are there for an R4 that would need to be met?
Chair Watson, Board Member Miller, I'd have to admit, I'm not an expert on building code requirements, so I don't have the comprehensive list of what all is required under that process. But I know usually the big ticket item is getting a suppressed fire sprinkler system installed within the facility.
Board Member Morrow.
And following up from that, how would you get it reclassified from R3 to R4?
So if the appeal was approved, then it would allow the applicant to move forward and provide the necessary building permit or plan sets that the building safety needs to verify the R4 occupancy and some of these improvements. After review, compliance, they can then issue a permit, and then the applicant would be able to move forward and do the work necessary that might need some modifications to the site.
So if we approve the appeal, they still have to go through that, get it set to R4, and install a sprinkler system?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Board Member Key.
Thank you, Chair. So perhaps this is a question better for the applicant, but it's in the same arena here. The fact that they're applying for this appeal and intend to have more than 6, then I'm assuming that in their business plan, they understand that they have to go through an R4 occupancy. So perhaps the applicant can explain to us what changes that they would need to make, and that they, in fact, are prepared to do that.
Board Member Comfer, Vice Chair Comfer. Your mic.
Before we change speakers, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
The impact, one of the things that you mentioned about this nexus was the precedent with the rule from 2021. How many group homes, do we know how many group homes that we have that might be affected by our decision today?
Actually, we just received another recent reasonable accommodations waiver request. I'll have to look at it, see if it's related to number of residents on site. That typically is some of the initial inquiries we get through the process. This is our first one related to sober living homes. But currently, right now, if you're operating a group home with up to 10, that doesn't change their statuses. It's
So-
just new requests.
So how many, because a group home can be an elder group home, it can be
correct,
sober
yeah.
living. How many, do we know how many group homes that we have in Tempe today?
Sure. Yeah, there is approximately around 75 group homes. There's different types, elder care, adult therapeutic homes, which is response to a disability. There is also child shelters, falls under this classification, as well as sober living homes.
And all those are limited to 5, none of them are 10.
That's correct.
So 75 times 5 is what, 350, 400 and some odd residents that we're dealing with?
375.
375, that could be doubled, which is 700. Okay.
And
Thank you.
additionally, actually, there's another group home classification that has about 80 developmentally disabled homes. That's something that the city doesn't regulate, sometimes often gets confused with, because they call those group homes by the state, but under the developmentally disabled classification, the city is prohibited from regulating zoning on DDD homes.
Those are still regulated by DHS, I think.
Right.
Yep,
Or DES.
yeah.
Board Member Miller?
Just as a follow-up to that, none of these, excluding the DDD homes for the moment, none of the ones that are currently existing have been grandfathered in. In other words, we're operating under the old 10 or less, and then when you change, they would be legal non-conforming.
That essentially would be the grandfathering rights, as it
Yeah.
legally allowed to remain, but non-conforming to our current standards. So they are allowed to continue to operate. I think there's anywhere from 25 to 30.
Out of that
those-
75
out of
or
those,
so?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Levesque.
Thank you.
We'd like to invite the applicant up. There was a specific question from Board Member Key.
Oh, I'll repeat the question.
yes.
So the fact that you've made the appeal and your intent is to have more than 5 residents at this location, which would automatically, if approved, trigger the requirement to go from R3 to R4 occupancy. Those occupancy changes, and we touched on one that we're aware of, sprinkling or indoor fire alarms. Are you aware of what you would need to do, and are you prepared to do those?
Yes and yes. We would continue through this process. I would be speculating if I knew exactly what the cost would be for a fire sprinkler system, but we're aware of the approximate cost there. We have a facilities management team that would be responsible for ensuring that the home gets up to standard.
Thank you.
And then if I could address one other topic that was raised, if I have the ability, on the group homes question, Board Member Miller, I don't believe there's a clean way, at least from our vantage point, to address the number of group homes. And I think the city kind of addressed on that. I can say as far as licensed sober living homes are concerned, according to DHS, there are 3 within the city of Tempe.
Board Member Miller?
You stated that you have a facility that's licensed for up to 15 in Phoenix.
Correct.
Is that equipped with fire sprinkler system and other things to bring it to an R4 standard?
I do not know. I don't believe so.
Really?
But it's a ranch style home,
Be
so the
surprised.
layout is a little different. It's got a mother-in-law suite, if you will, attached to it.
Any other questions for the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, I would like to open it up for public comment, although I'm guessing we don't have any commenters. Okay. Then I believe this is, you'll have to check me on the process, but this is the time for the board to have an open discussion. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair Watson.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open it up for discussion. Board Member Miller?
Well, I'll open it, what the heck. Um, I am inclined to support this based upon what I've heard from the applicant with respect to his willingness to go and take the necessary steps to get to an R4, R4 standard. Were he not to, if it was simply a matter of saying, I want up to 10 people in this facility and I don't want to do anything else to make it safer, let's put it that way, then I would not want to support it. But I think given that, I think it makes sense. And I also frankly don't necessarily share the staff's concerns with respect to opening the floodgates for all these other group homes to come in, because if one of the things they have to do is go from R3 to R4, that's probably a minimum of $20,000 to $25,000 that they're going to have to invest, if not more than that, in today's dollars. And I think a lot of group homes are going to be less than anxious to go and put that kind of money into something.
I would comment that they would have to do the fire upgrades regardless, because that's code, so that's really not a stipulation from my perspective.
Well, I'm not stipulating, I'm saying he's going to have to do it regardless.
Well, absolutely. But you said that was part of the justification about them wanting to invest in the safety. While that makes sense, I disagree, because in order for them to go 6+, they have to do it to be code compliant legally. Other comments from the board? Board Member Key.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I just have to continue to go back to the comment, quasi-question that I made earlier, in that this doesn't appear to be a waiver request for someone or an individual, like the ordinance says, for a disability waiver. This appears to be more of a request to, frankly, double the amount of people that they can put into a home that's being run by a business. And so I'm not sure I can support this request. Thank you.
Board Member Palmer.
I would like to maybe just add on to that a little bit. Looking at the 5 requirements to grant a reasonable accommodation waiver, I just don't see the justification for it. I don't think, they are allowed to operate a group home up to 5 people. They're not being deprived of that right. I think it is simply just trying to double the occupants in the home itself. So for that, I will be voting to uphold the ZAs.
Thank you. Other comments? Board Member Morrow.
So acknowledging your concerns about standing, which is the word I would use, they're representing the 5 clients who are currently living there. And if you buy into their nexus analysis, then those 5 members need a couple more members, or those 5 clients need more clients to be among them to sort of help with the group dynamic. Something he said that really triggered something in my mind when he said 8 to 12. Those words are very significant to me, because those are the sort of constitutionally required numbers for juries in Arizona. You have to have 8 or 12 people. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, for having a diverse group of people who can formulate a good discussion, and then hopefully there's not more than one holdout in order to get to the right result. And so that sort of helped me process why I can see the doctors want 8 to 12 members of a group home in order to prevent one person from being isolated and make sure that there's always at least a good number of people there if there's a vacancy. So I think that's why I don't really share your concern, Mr. Kigi, and I agree with the things that Dr. Miller said, and particularly with the fire sprinkler thing was a concern for me, and then once I heard that they have to do that, that didn't stop being a concern for me, so I'm going to be voting in favor of the applicant.
Board Member Gans.
I'm going to call for the question.
I'm sorry?
I'm calling for the question.
There's no motion.
Oh, we have to have a motion first.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to make a motion?
Just a second, I'm going to render an opinion first.
Okay, thanks.
So I am going to vote against this. I don't believe that we're really, I think appealing under the disabilities clause concerns me, that it's a misrepresentation. I realize that the clients have disabilities, but the organization that's making the request does not, from what I've read. I'm also concerned that doubling that with the space, I'm concerned about the comment that the garage could accommodate somebody living there. That means that's at least been discussed and or thought of, and that would be a code compliance issue as well. So in my opinion, I'm going to vote against this. Board Member Comfort, did you want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I would like to make a motion. I'm not necessarily going to explain my vote, but my motion is to deny the appeal request.
I have a motion to deny the appeal request from Vice Chair Confer,
I will second that motion.
a second from Board Member Gans.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. In a situation like this, would it be more appropriate to move to approve the appeal rather than to deny it? In other words, having an affirmative vote, and then you vote down the approval rather than essentially voting yes to deny something. Does that make sense?
I understand what your logic is. I'd like to consult Mr. Abramson for guidance.
Thank you, Chair Watson. If you were to vote in the affirmative to approve the appeal, and you had more negative votes on that, then you'd have to turn it around and vote for a denial of the appeal.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that, okay, thank you.
So we will go with Vice Chair Confer's motion to deny the appeal. Those that support it being denied will vote affirmative. Those that do not support it will vote no. So I'm going to call for a vote. I'm going to start with Board Member Morrow,
I vote no.
Board Member Gans,
Affirmative.
Board Member Key,
I vote aye.
Board Member Vice Chair Confer,
Aye.
Board Member Palmer,
Aye.
Board Member Miller,
No.
and I vote aye. So that would be 5 ayes in support of the motion to deny and 2 against. Okay. Are there any other business that we want to cover?
A couple of things. First off, if we are going to have a meeting next month, it will be on the 23rd. We do not have any cases at present. And as my tenure ends here with the board, I want to wish everybody or thank everybody for their civic mindedness and their volunteerism. It's a difficult task, and it doesn't go unnoticed. I appreciate it. I know my colleagues do, and in the end, the citizens of the city of Tempe do. So thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. We also very much appreciate your service. Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to adjourn. Sorry.
Motion from Vice Chair Confer to adjourn, second.
Second.
Board Member Miller, seconds. Board Member Gantz, thirds. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Didn't think so. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for